The body is so amazing and the relationship we have with it. And we're so often just in our heads and doing what seems like the right thing to do, whether it's cultural or societal expectations or familial expectations. And I was very blessed with a great childhood, but I became my own overachiever and had frequencies of people pleasing and accommodator energy that a lot of people have, especially healers and I think women even more. That over giving came very easy to me. And in my relationship and with my kids and with my practice, I had gotten so out of touch with my own body and my own needs and my own soul and authenticity. That is what I believe to be the core, that lack of self-love, that really, because my heart, it was hard to explain what else could have led to that, because I had done so many amazing physical things throughout my life and my journey of healing and learning about functional medicine and all of these gifts.
Hello and welcome to Get Yourself Optimized. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer. It is my pleasure to have Dr. Saff Koche with us. Dr. Koche is a triple board certified medical professional, founder and director of Spectra Wellness Solutions Clinic, owner of Lit Labs Performance Center, and an author and nationally recognized speaker. Dr. Koche is a truth seeker, paving the way for access to unbiased health and medical freedom. Ever since her own exposure to the medical field due to childhood leukemia and heart failure from chemo, she's been focused on finding the root cause of disease rather than treating symptoms. She specializes in anti-aging and biohacking through regenerative, traditional, and functional medicine. She focuses on all aspects required for total body healing, including nutrition, hormone replacement therapies, and enhancing mitochondrial function. Dr. Koche has lectured nationally and has been featured on numerous podcasts, radio, and TV segments across the country. Dr. Koche, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's first of all talk a bit about your origin story, how you got so passionate about changing the medical industry or establishment through your experience as a child with facing disease. Can we go back in time to those early days?
Absolutely. Well, I was diagnosed with childhood leukemia at the age of 15, despite feeling totally fine. So that journey, and then it relapsed. I went through 3 years of chemotherapy, did really well. It relapsed right when my hair had grown back, and we thought I was out of the woods, about to start my junior year in college, and it relapsed on my ovary. Had to start chemo again, and then I promptly went into severe heart failure from one of the drugs. So what happened there was it set me up, and it was a gift truly to be a patient before I became a doctor, because it put me on my path without any sidetracks. And I entered medical school with lots of questions, the main one being why. And what I found is, as I would watch patients come in with different sets of symptomatology or complaints, they would get put on protocols. They'd have all the tests and the scans. They may get a diagnosis, but they'd get on protocols that didn't seem to answer their why either. And I would drive everybody crazy with my questions. And the answer I got over and over was, this is just how we do it. So for me, being a seeker, it didn't make sense. It didn't make sense for my own journey. And so I started my practice focusing. I went into what I found was the broadest approach, which was internal medicine. That seemed to have more answers than anywhere else. And as I started my practice, just started diving into things like nutrition, teaching myself things we didn't learn in medical school, eventually stumbling upon functional medicine, thankfully, and getting, a lot of deep training in that. And over the years, my practice, basically my body has led me to discoveries that have always been 10 to 15 years before their time. And I have a comprehensive clinic now with a naturopath and upper cervical chiro, and we do a lot of very cutting edge things because I've needed them to continue to heal myself.
Well, we're going to get into some of these cutting edge things, but first, could you differentiate for our listener traditional medicine, functional medicine, regenerative medicine, and internal medicine you also mentioned. So,
Oh yeah, love it. Thank you for asking that. So traditional medicine is a word used, at least in the US, for our typical sort of Western model that tends to be, unfortunately, primarily excelling in acute care. From long-term disease management, it's mostly done with pharmaceuticals. So it's what most of your listeners, they go to a typical doctor, that experience will be considered traditional medicine. Functional medicine is an entire new branch of looking at the body. It's a new branch of study over maybe the past 15, 20 years, where you go deeper into the cause. So, what I was searching for when I was a child, um, or when I was 20-ish, was not out there. And now it is still not taught in mainstream medical schools, but is a lot more access to the concepts of why disease has happened, where is it coming from, and functional medicine has a pretty good template for learning that. So you learn things more as a system, the body as a system, how the organs relate to each other, and more of the actual root cause and trying to fix it. Internal medicine is a branch of traditional medicine. So internal medicine is similar to when you talk about your primary care. It is the deepest you can get in a residency and training in the body. And so you'll hear about family practice or internists. Internists are traditional doctors that trained in internal medicine. And then I think there was one more we said.
regenerative, yeah.
Oh, regenerative. Yes. So regenerative is a buzzword that has to do with how we can regenerate tissue. So potentially reverse the aging clock. And that's a field that's growing more and more today, with everything from stem cells to peptides and other things that can actually potentially reverse disease or reverse your aging process.
Right. And speaking of stem cells, you're getting some right now. You're connected to an IV.
Yeah, there was a we can see. I think this is mostly audio, but I have a bag kind of hanging up here, and
Yeah. So our folks on YouTube watching will be able to see this.
yeah. So that, and I'm usually kind of a tough stick, so I was excited because my nurse was able to get me today. So here I am dripping, and when we can talk about some journeying in that whenever you want. I'm happy to share my experiences.
Yeah, let's talk about that now. Like what is it about stem cell therapy that really makes a difference? And it's different from like PRP and some of these other modalities. I'm curious to hear how you ended up on stem cell therapy.
For me, my body led me, just like I told you. So 7 years ago, I had been doing generally pretty well, but I had a little kid and an older daughter, and was running this practice. My stress level was super high, and I went into early menopause, and that all of that combination tripped my heart, which had been relatively stable, back into severe heart failure. And I found myself in the hospital with the transplant cardiologist trying to get me in the ICU on the list for a transplant. And that to me was not on my list of things to do in this lifetime. So at that point, reevaluating myself, understanding that I needed to go some different pathways, including a lot of deep spiritual work, which that tie to illness is something I'd love to hit on in this conversation as well. I researched what would be the newest potential to reverse this the quickest, and it was some new data coming out on stem cells. So the stem cell industry is and just world in general is pretty complex and confusing for the average person who doesn't have a lot, and even frankly for practitioners, because there's lots of different types. So stem cells got a bad rap when there was a whole lot of ethical dilemmas initially when they came out, because they were using embryos, and that has fallen by the wayside, thankfully. So stem cells that we're utilizing today, when people mention that, they're either coming from yourself. So we all have our own stem cells. You can access them in fat tissue and bone marrow and blood, or they are coming from donated products at the time of birth. So moms are being screened now at many different locations and asked if they want to donate the birth, the leftover placenta and cord. So this tissue that was typically just thrown out, we have now, there's many facilities that have found ways in conjunction with universities to extract these cells and find ways to clear and clean them and then inject them into patients and have some pretty phenomenal results. So in that world of stem cells, there are many different levels. And the thing that I'm looking into and trying, which is brand new, is a specific exosome. So exosomes is one of the things that are mentioned a lot when people get in the conversation about stem cells. Exosomes are interesting because they're kind of like precursors that help us turn on our own stem cells. And that was always more attractive to me because I preferred to have my own cells that were just waking up. So we have stem cells that are already kind of functioning. And then we have the idea that we have stem cells called very small embryonic like cells that could just be waking up. So there's a lot still unfolding. And exosomes are like messengers that can kind of help activate this. So I personally did everything from amniotic fluid to exosomes back then when I was that sick. It did help me. It wasn't by any means the only thing. And what I'm trying right now is something that's kind of newer that people aren't doing just yet, which is progenitor cells specific for cardiac cell lines. So you can actually find these cells that if you had Parkinson's, for example, or if you had diabetes, you could find neural exosomes or progenitor cells, cardiac progenitor cells, pancreatic progenitor cells. So this field's exploding. It's very exciting, and I'm just kind of getting my hands in it and getting deep in it and trying to really understand what makes sense for my patients and for me.
Wow. Amazing. And so did you end up on the heart transplant list at some point and then you got
I did
taken
not.
back off?
Yeah.
Okay. You never did.
I was never on it. We put in a biventricular pacemaker, so I do have a pacemaker in as just an assurance, but it doesn't even do anything. And I can tell you, sitting here today, 7 years later, without any kind of surgery other than that pacer, I do take a cardiac medicine, but I feel better than I did when I was 30, 20. I feel better than I did 20 years ago with all the work I've done on myself, mitochondrial work, many of the things we'll talk about. So thankfully, no,
Yeah. Amazing.
we were able to avoid that. Yeah.
Yes. Thank God for that.
Yes.
Speaking of which, you did some deep spiritual work, and that, to me, that seems tied into the root cause of the illnesses, I would guess. So, can you elaborate?
Absolutely. So, the body is so amazing and the relationship we have with it. And we're so often just in our heads and doing what seems like the right thing to do, whether it's cultural or societal expectations or familial expectations. And, I was very blessed with a great childhood, but I became my own overachiever and had frequencies of people pleasing and accommodator energy that a lot of people have, especially healers and I think women even more. But that over giving came very easy to me. And in my relationship and with my kids and with my practice, I had gotten so out of touch with my own body and my own needs and my own soul and authenticity, that is what I believe to be the core, that lack of self-love, that really, because my heart, it was hard to explain what else could have led to that, because I had done so many amazing physical things throughout my life and my journey of healing and learning about functional medicine and all of these gifts, that the spiritual was the one thing when I was laying in the hospital bed just saying, what else do you want? all I do is serve. And the answer I got was, well, you don't serve yourself. And so that was the wake up for me where I started having boundaries. I started saying no. I started tapping into what are my true passions? What do I really want to be seeing patients all day, every day, 4 days a week, and just barely catching up on the fifth day? Or do I want to be doing more of a combination of speaking and writing and, things that get me excited and passionate? So that was it's been a huge, probably one of the most impactful of my entire career and healing journey has been this past 7 years.
Marie Kondo, she wrote the book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, and her philosophy is to toss the stuff, donate the stuff that doesn't spark joy.
Yeah, you got it.
So you jettisoned all that stuff, huh?
It's a work in progress. Can we say that? It's hard, when you've built a life around giving. When you wake up to the fact that you really are meant to be in a balanced give and receive cycle. Um, One of the things I've had to realize is I at this point in my life, I need to have just a little bit of time where the people I interact with, I need to be receiving almost more from them than I can give them, because I'm just so out of, like, my debt of give. I've given so much that to get it back into some kind of level of balance is just taking a little bit of time. And I think that's a lot of us, a lot of your listeners. This is where it comes natural and easy. And then there's going to be those that are able to take, and we want to help them. And then that's where we get in these kind of codependent, unhealthy dynamics.
Right. And so how does this tie into your soul's mission? Do you get a sense for your soul mission and how this, like we all have, my understanding is that we all have this soul correction that we're meant to work on. In Hebrew, it's called tikkun. And we also have a mission or a purpose beyond just simply addressing whatever and healing, making whole whatever is given to us as a gift in terms of our shadow side.
Well, first of all, I love that you just quoted some Hebrew, because I just came back from Israel, and I was on a journey, and I'm very intrigued with Kabbalah and how it came before any religion, and its tie to the body and healing. But I would say, when we get out of our own way, our mission becomes more and more clear. So my mission has always been to provide hope for those that are struggling with any kind of symptom or diagnosis, along with learning how to push the body to levels that we have yet to experience. And I think COVID has been one of the biggest gifts in this area, because more people are open to this discussion that we're having, and it shed the light even more on the gap that is pretty massive between our current medical system and where it is going, which is exciting. So my mission, my tikkun, my all of that is very aligned with what I've had to do with my own body. But it is to wake people up to the truth of how much more is available, have people understand that there may be some agendas for keeping some of this information from the general public, have people be curious, have people ask questions and explore, and probably most importantly, restore sovereignty, this connection to self and sovereignty that allows you to be in partnership with your healer instead of in an unbalanced dynamic.
Yeah. Speaking of balance, how are you moving towards more balance? Are you cutting down your workload, your hours at the clinic? Are you changing the types of work that you're doing throughout the week? Are you traveling more, traveling less? Like what's happening?
Yeah, we it's great when you really step out and look, and being people pleasing accommodator. I had this huge practice with 8,000 patients that I all of whom, and I had a nurse practitioner with me and another doctor, but we take impeccable care of our patients. But the insurance model is really pretty broken. So for me, one of the biggest things was I had to get comfortable with letting that piece of it go for me. My other practitioners are still taking insurance, but I had to go by just transitioning out of insurance into a cash based model. I was able to see patients 3 days a week instead of four, and get that growth day where I could stay on top of the newest science, where I could start, I'm getting ready to start my own podcast, which I would, love to have you join me on. I, yeah, I being able to really expand on and finish my second book that I've been working on, but never had time for. So, and then doing a lot more speaking, because connecting to patients or to people through speaking and through events is probably another one of my high level passions, is that motivational, transformational speaking area.
Yeah. So what is the topic of the second book?
It is a journey back to you. So it's basically what we're talking about. It's me guiding people through my story, teaching them the concepts I've learned along the way and how it can be modeled in their lives, and giving them the tools to start that sovereign journey of healing and potentially find the right partner to work with them through it.
So the journey to Israel and back, what was the biggest thing that you learned from that process?
Well, I intentionally went on my own because I had always wanted to go. So I didn't bring my family, and I had a guide with me who was a biblical archaeologist. So I was able to kind of really just sit in the land and the 2,500 years of history there. And I would say it was probably the first time I allowed myself to be fully embodied. Meaning I was so connected to the earth and the stories and the history, and I wasn't being pulled with, when are we going to eat, or I have to go to the bathroom, or I want to do this today, I want to do that tomorrow, just allowing. And I would tell everybody listening, take that time for yourself, to a place that's always been something you've wanted to see or do. And that time, it allowed magical things to happen. I ended up with an artist, one of my guide's friends. I was in his studio, which I never would have. Which was in his little apartment in Tel Aviv, and I ended up at the Kabbalah Center in Safat in the north, and being able to have a personal meeting with one of the main leaders and healers there. And so things, when a lot of times when we're embodied and connected, things are so free and clear, and they come to us instead of the constant chase, or trying to get there on our own.
Yeah. Did you meet Rabbi Elana Nava in Tzfat?
No, I met Ayal Rice.
Okay, I don't know him.
Okay, so he at the Kabbalah Center there, but I know they have so many, right, that are in that area, and I ended up being there on Shabbat, which people would try their whole life to plan that. And I didn't plan it that way. It just happened. And because I think, again, I was in flow state and I didn't have to worry about other people with me, I got to spend the evening, the dinner, Shabbat dinner in the home with him and his wife and four of his nine kids. And it was magical, what I learned. And she's an international speaker, for women's studies. And so different things like that kept happening on this trip, and I've brought a lot of that energy back with me.
I find Israel to be such an incredible place to connect with the upper worlds. The veil is thinner there for sure, and especially in Tzfat and in Jerusalem as well, and also during the Shabbat time period, the veil is thinner then, and also on major Jewish holidays, and even just the Rosh Chodesh, which is the new moon each month. So there's the lunar calendar that The Jewish calendar is based on lunar calendar, not solar. We just had a new moon as of well, it started not last night, but the night before last, and ended last night. So that is a thin place or thin. Um, yeah, I'm using terminology I actually learned from one of my guests, Joe McQuillan. He talked about thin places in the episode that we did, and he would communicate with his son who had passed by going into his room, into the son's room at 3 in the morning, and then he would channel, he'd receive information from his son who had passed. That was the best time as far as receiving, 3 a.m. and the strongest location.
I love that, we can have this conversation and people listening, I'm sure, have had similar experiences, because when we do get out of our head and we allow our heart, which by the way has more neurons than our, we send more messages from our heart to our brain than the other way around. And this, when we talked about getting optimized and we talk about the true edge, um, when you go, whether it's the thin place or it is heart centered coherence, which I think we can access a thinner place wherever we are by being in our heart, energy field. But if we go in our heart energy field while we're in these incredible places like Safat, game on, right? Um, but I think that people can learn, and this is something that when we talk about what's helped me heal my heart, there's no mysteries that it was my heart that gave out, when it was this exact journey I needed to learn to help teach the world about. When we go into our heart space, not only can we communicate with potentially people we have lost, but it's communicating more and more with ourselves and our higher wisdom and the knowledge and guidance on what the world needs, what our tikkun is, how to heal our bodies, how to have more fulfilling relationships. All of those questions, they come so much easier when we access those gifts that many people don't even know are there, let alone work towards, experiencing.
So how are you bringing Kabbalah and this mystical side of things into your daily life?
So I actually did a year-long course in the healing and intuitive arts about a year ago as well. And so I do a little bit of hands-on with my patients where I can work with energy. But for my own personal, it is every day when I wake up, I meditate with different crystals. I'm very, very connected to the energy of crystals. And I will try to ground, put my feet in the earth. And I just take that time. I make it doesn't even have to always be dedicated time. I will drop into my heart at various times during the day. I'll just catch myself being stuck in my head and the machinations and all that goes on up there. So whether it's again stones or meditating or grounding, I'm also very connected to the trees and to nature. So that helps me as well.
You know, there's actually a Jewish holiday to celebrate the trees.
I did.
Yeah, Tu B'Shvat.
Tu B'Shvat, yes. And I think you don't have to, the beauty is a lot of these things, this came before religion. So the messages from trees, the frequencies, the things that we learn about the body through um, some of these ancient teachings, they are for everyone, and especially now with the planet where it is in a state of transition. It truly is time for the collapse of the patriarchy and for new systems to be awakening. And the trees are wise. They've already made a lot of this transition. So I think if you're struggling with a health issue of any sort, just putting your feet in the earth, letting those acupuncture points on your feet connect to the energy coming up from the planet, putting your back against a tree and just letting the tree hold you can really make a big difference in the physical presentation of your symptoms.
It always perplexed me how some people could use the term tree hugger as an insult. Like, so disconnected from the earth, from true reality, to see that as a dig. I found that curious.
Well, and I think honestly, like we said, now that things are shifting and some of the darkness, the light's been really turned on, and people are waking up and asking questions. The tree huggers are becoming more popular.
I agree. Yeah. And also, when you see what you want to see in terms of the evolution of humanity and consciousness and so forth, you make that real. Right? Your expectations, your positive expectancy, actually contributes to what you experience in this illusion called reality.
Well, and that's David Hawkins in his Power versus Force. There was a line that I read in that book about 12 years ago that said, and I'm sure you're familiar with that map of consciousness that he has.
Yeah. So, what was the quote that stuck with you?
So the quote that stuck with me was one person vibrating at around 500 at the level of love negated stadiums full. So several stadiums full of people still stuck beneath 200. For me, that took away a lot of pressure because it meant if I just continued to work on my own connection to self and my heart connection and my grounding and all of that, that I could carry and, like you said, affect change in on the planet as a whole by staying at that higher vibration.
Yeah, and David Hawkins' scale goes up to 1,000 in the book, but where we're at now, because we've evolved so much and we're just baby steps into this. I mean, there's so much more to go, but we're already well past having 1,000 be the cap. It's my understanding. Yeah, yeah. I had a conversation with Philip Seymour van Helsendorf Felling. He was a guest a couple of times on this podcast. He's the founder of Leela Quantum Tech, and I know in my heart that is true. That it's over 1,000 now, and that you can aspire to hit 1,000 or greater. 700 in the book is listed as enlightenment, and 700 and up. But I believe, yeah, aim higher, you'll do better. I learned that in negotiating class, a Karis negotiating seminar, business seminar I took in like 1995 or so, 96. And that applies not just to business, it applies to life and the spiritual climb up Jacob's ladder.
Well, I love Philip. We actually did some clinical studies with his products. So the Lila Q is a legit and the fact that we're on the planet now where these types of therapies and treatments are hopefully going to have evidence-based science more and more behind them, so that we're still probably a 20-year lag, but those of us that are open and willing to continue to push this forward, it's really an exciting time to be alive, honestly. And that's where I do think COVID was a very big gift.
Yeah, well, in Judaism, I learned that everything is a gift, everything is a blessing. This is like a core precept of Judaism. Everything is a blessing. You know, Rabbi Ish Gamzu said many, many, many years ago that this too is a gift, or this too is for the good. That's the quote. Yeah, this too is for the good. He was famous for saying that.
Well, and what's really interesting is that when I was diagnosed at 15, being a teenager, a rough age to have anything. It's never a good age to have that, but 15 was pretty tough. That was also what I had been taught. And I knew in my soul that there was a higher purpose. I knew this too was good, just like you said. And I that's how I navigated I still graduated college on time, even though my entire junior year I went at night to one semester I went at night for physics. And then I couldn't return to Emory, and I ended up as a visiting student at Columbia for my second semester. And I all of it just being divinely led and holding that there was a reason. And that's what I teach my patients. So I do think that's a beautiful tenet of Judaism. And one of the things I learned in Israel is really all the religions it's all the same. And there really are a lot of these principles, and Kabbalah being 2,500 years ago, a lot of those things starting, a lot of the concepts starting, and then really we're all just connected in that core way of how our body works, and trusting that the good is there, and that if we tap into our hearts and connect to others on the earth, that we're going to be led. So
Yeah, you were talking about how some things came before, like came before religion or came before us or whatever. One thing that I just recently watched, it was Rabbi Manis Friedman talking about what came before us. It was just brilliant and just makes so much sense. The reason for us existing must have come before we existed. Otherwise, it would have been reasonless. It would have been purposeless. Our creation would have had no purpose, but it had a purpose, a reason, because that existed first.
I love that. And I think when these past 100 years or so, if you look at medicine, well, I'd say if you look back into even the early 1900s, where medicine got shifted out of this partnership of healing and love and compassion and turned into a business. Um, I think we're facing that same point right now on the planet, where we're trying just to get back to what was the reason before, like you just said. What was the reason before medicine became a business? It was to be in each other's energy, hold space, bring in that healing energy, allow yourself to envision yourself healed and that healthy version of you. And the technology that's coming out, whether it's the things that are dripping in me right now, which is a specific cardiac progenitor cell, which I looked for desperately 7 years ago. And here I am getting it today while I'm talking to you. That's pretty beautiful synergy.
Synchronicity, right?
Absolutely.
So, what other modalities are you really focused on for your healing journey and for your clients, your patients?
I would say the couple categories, mitochondrial. So our mitochondria are the engines that produce energy inside all of our cells, and they used to be their own bacteria. So they have their own DNA. So from a spiritual perspective, mitochondria are fascinating, and they respond poorly to stress and negative thought patterning, and really well to the opposite of that. And so you're seeing, everybody doing all these different biohacks with light therapy and cold therapy and fasting and um, different types of PEMF. And that we are relearning that we have the capacity to not just heal the mitochondria that we have, but to trigger the production of new ones. And that in and of itself is incredibly exciting. And so I do a lot of different therapies with um, and light and cold, and saunas and PEMF and vibrational therapies. So that is probably one of the main areas that I'm fascinated by. And then peptides, which is a newer kind of playground for us as practitioners, because they are strings of amino acids. And for those that don't know, 40 or more are considered a protein. Less than 40 is considered a peptide. And many of the ones that are out now have some pretty incredible benefits. Even the controversial weight loss peptides that were developed as diabetic drugs, when you go dive deep into the science, they are amazing. They have they're protecting our DNA. They have cardioprotective impact, neuroprotective impact. They're resetting communication between the cells. And if you expand these two things I'm talking about, mitochondria and peptide, into our previous part of our conversation, the energy of where we can go, and even sacred geometric type shapes and energetic healing. I think we're going to continue to understand that mitochondria healing and utilization of these peptides and protection of DNA and junk DNA that we know isn't really junk. We're going to start understanding how these two conversations are the same,
Two perspectives out the same window, looking at the same external environment. Just one person sees the freeway and the other person sees a tree.
And the fact that we're just starting to see it. It's a very exciting time to be alive.
And I feel we chose it. We chose this time. We chose our parents, our kids, our siblings if we have them, our business partners, the challenges, the ailments, and things that we deal with in the lifetime. That's all through like soul contracts, I think.
Our podcast guests.
Yes.
Because we never know we're going to have be this aligned, and it makes life exciting because everyone you meet has a story, and everyone you meet has the ability to heal themselves and help heal others. And most people are just looking for that guide because the people and systems that they have trusted have proven to be really driven by the wrong motivation.
Yeah, when you give your power away, it's very hard to wrestle it back. So don't give your power away at all. And to the doctors or the medical establishment or the government or whatever, you've given your power away by letting them dictate your what modalities you employ, what drugs you put in your system, et cetera.
And a lot of times, we don't realize it. I have the pleasure of speaking for one of Tony Robbins' events, which is his Life Mastery event. And I tell a story, and I do kind of just an overview of functional medicine for this particular event. And one of the stories I share is we can get really fancy in the technology and the peptides and the exosomes and the mitochondrial optimization and, the newest bells and whistles. But we can also have incredible healing in our day in and day out moments. And I went to go get trained for a different type of stem cell. This was about a year and a half ago. And we were using light therapy, a laser. So they had to draw your blood, spin it down, get the PRP, and then activate these V cells with light and sound, and then inject them back in. And anyways, pretty fascinating technique. I needed an IV, and I alluded to at the beginning when I showed you this. I'm usually a pretty hard stick from all my years of chemo, and there were about 10 doctors there. We were all training, and I had my nurse with me who can usually find my vein, and so I didn't enter my mind that anyone would have trouble. So, and then the nurse there was actually bragging about how she's one stick Ida. And anyway, long story short, 3 sticks later, she couldn't get me, and my nurse couldn't get me, and I started getting teary. And then because it struck me 5 times, and people were watching me, and they finally called in the ringer, who was this guy who had previously been an interventional radiologist. He came in, asked everybody to get out of the room, and he sat down and he looked me in the eye, and he said, "Lisa, do I have your permission to draw your blood and try to get an IV on you?" I started crying. I said yes, and he got an IV. And it resonated with me so deeply that I have, since that day, asked all of my patients if I have their permission to use muscle testing with them to get information from their body. And that day I said, I think I've healed more from that question than I did from this cutting edge tech with this laser. Um, so the everyday experiences of what we may hold in our body without even knowing it, and what you, to your point about, sovereignty and trust, and how much that plays a role in our life and our health.
Yeah. Have you asked your heart if it gives you permission to heal it and to integrate it into the rest of your body?
Well, I've thanked it, but maybe not that specific question. And I appreciate that. I'm going to do that right now because I've got these magical cells dripping in while you give me the gift of that question. So thank you.
Yeah. We're all just messengers, right?
Yes. And my heart is very openly saying yes. It's for the ability as we heal. And I'd love to hear and experience more of your journey and your life. I think this is going to be a friendship that continues, I hope. But as we journey, just the more I heal, the more successful I can get, the more I just will pour it back into those around me and, the systems around me. So,
Yeah. Well, we're here to serve, but we have to serve our bodies because they're on rental from the creator, and not taking care of our physicality while we're taking care of others. That's like not putting your own oxygen mask on first in an emergency. And of course, that you can't save anybody if you've run out of oxygen.
you got it. And it's more than just that. So, yes, working on yourself, acknowledging you need self care, um, getting a practice in place is almost, when I speak to people, I talk about two phases, and there's probably many more, but I talk about healing first and then stepping into performance. And the healing could be the oxygen mask, and it's all the functional medicine or a lot of it. The performance is the peptides, mitochondrial, the exosomes, the things that are still coming down the pike that we don't even understand. But it's also that the performance of, like we said, allowing my heart, allowing these cells to come in and deciding it wants to heal. It's also the performance levels of, can a thought and quantum entanglement and, a connection and a conversation so beautiful as this one, like, how is that and now allowing us to get to these quantum levels of healing that we're just now beginning to taste.
Yeah, we're all entangled. We're all connected. We're all one. And I know we're out of time, but I want to leave this conversation with, and I want to leave you with a quote from the Baal Shem Tov that I think is going to resonate. I have a feeling. My intuition tells me, and I'll just read this quickly. Nothing is by chance. Every single event or experience in a person's life is predetermined and purposeful. So if a person chances to witness the degradation of his fellow, he must realize that he too suffers from the same lack, in one form or another. Otherwise, why would divine providence have caused him to see his fellows failing? Obviously, to open his eyes to something he must correct in himself. So even if one is your enemy, and justifiably so, even if his moral and spiritual downfall is one of his own making, it could have happened without your having been made aware of it. That you have witnessed it has nothing to do with him. It is a message to you, and joining you to deal with a similar negative element, be it in the subtlest of forms within yourself.
Beautiful. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And um, in my desk here, I have water from the River Jordan. A patient had asked me to bring it back, and I went on my quest and my journey because he encouraged me to go. A patient who was not at all spiritual. He was one of my typical kind of primary care patients. And I had an experience in the river which was surprising to me because I didn't really think that I would. And it was similar, just we are all connected. Anything we've been told, it doesn't need to be accepted at face value. It needs to be felt, felt and expanded upon, and we're just starting that performance where we don't know what we're capable of, but it's going to be pretty darn exciting.
There's synchronicities all over the place. But when I just happened to open the Bible the other day, and it took me to Kings, 2 Kings 5, and relates to Jordan River. Elisha sent Naaman a messenger who said, "Go and wash in the Jordan River 7 times. Then your skin will be healed and you will be clean." And Naaman became angry and left. Well, eventually he did go and get and immersed himself in the Jordan River, and he did heal. But it took Elisha telling him directly that this is what you're to do. So, or no, actually, no. What happened was the messenger. I forget exactly what how it unfolded. The only thing I remember about it. So Naaman was very angry and left, and then whoever he ended up speaking to said, "Well, if it was going to be really hard, you would have done what you were told, right?" Yes. Well, this was very easy, and you chose not to do it. So he went and he did it, and then he healed. So
Wow. Well, I had this experience just really quick in the Holocaust Museum, where I was having some flashbacks to a past life, and I did not feel well. And I mean, it was extreme. And I felt Jesus, who I was raised Jewish, just how he was Jewish, and just, the path away from Judaism, all of this is the same path, so just like little detours. And that was in the river. It was connection to him saying, help me, like, this is not what I ever intended, like, in my name, that people will be hurt. And just feeling that and wanting to help people know that they can heal themselves. That's like a lot of, I believe, what his message was meant to be. And it doesn't need, religion doesn't need to separate us.
all separation is illusion. We are all one. God is one. There's nothing that is independent of God. There's nothing that is not God.
Beautiful, including these amazing cardiac exosomes that my heart, that has been opened even more by this conversation, is allowing in. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And thank you, listener, for being open minded and open hearted. We'll catch you in the next episode. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off.